Got a little bit of a story today for you folks. We have Lou, my soon-to-be gone 2011 Ford Edge with 3.5 Duratec, and we're gonna test the oil as we did, and then run it against Antonio's beater. I have an oil test from Lou, and I have an oil test from Antonio's beater. Now, Antonio's beater is a 3.5 liter VCT Duratec, first gen, and of course Lou is a TI VCT 3.5, and that is the second generation of the Duratec. But that being said, Antonio beats his 2008 Ford Edge to death. It's a front wheel drive, and I don't think he does a lot of good oil changes based on the oil test I saw. His oil test was not really what I consider good oil. I'm not even sure if it was even a synthetic. But anyway, we're going to compare oil tests to a 19-year-old guy that thinks his Ford Edge is a race car versus a rather more older person that drives his Edge a little bit more conservatively. However, that being said, let's go and check something else out. Now me being one never to back down from a challenge, I went ahead and when Antonio was with me, we went and did a little bit of an acceleration run just to prove a point that a 320,000 mile Ford Edge driven by yours truly can definitely outperform Antonio's 2008. I knew it would because I, one, have more torque and more horsepower because I have the TI VCT, and of course he didn't. Then that was pretty much it. Pulled away from him. He never got ahead of me, and you know, it is what it is. Anyway, bragging rights on that. As you can see in this short little run here, yes, as you can see, we are now firing it up, and I'm running, and then once I get to a certain speed, I then shut it down, and then Antonio has to keep going because he's got to try to stay ahead somehow. Anyway, we all know the truth. He never passed me. But anyway, let's go back to the oil. As you can see, got some video here of Antonio changing his oil, and we went ahead and during this process went and grabbed us a sample of his oil. In that turn, I then mailed off his oil, and I called it Antonio's beater. Basically, Antonio had a lot of things going on that we needed to address, and as you see also in the video, before we had our little race, we also changed his spark plugs, as you can see here. Got those done. We got his oil changed. He chose a 5W30 oil that I recommended he use because 520 just won't do it for him, because I was afraid he was having engine oil and metal particles in his oil due to wear, and I pretty much was spot on. He had 7,000 miles on this oil change, and he's running a 5W20. I have no idea the brand or anything it was, but based on this oil report, I found that he wasn't using what I consider a good quality oil. It was pretty low in all the other aspects, but we went ahead and got it done, and we're going to compare his oil test to my oil test on my 2011 3.5 Duratec with about 319,000 miles or so on it. So we're going to compare a 19-year-old young man that beats his car, his Ford Edge, versus an older person like me that drives more normally and doesn't beat it. So we're going to compare this, but first of all, let's see what they say about Antonio's oil. Now, as you can see right here, we have his oil, and it says, Bill, despite the hard use, the engine still looks pretty good compared to all the 3.5 samples in our database for the universal averages. Those are based on 6,700 miles on the oil. The only metal that catches the eye as a point is lead, indicating a little more bearing wear than average. It isn't unusual for engines that are beaten to death to wear a bit more than average, though, especially at the bearings and steel parts. No, iron's a little elevated too. If oil pressure's good and everything's running well, let's see how the trends play out. The TBN was getting pretty low at 1.5, so he had pretty much exhausted his oil and needed an oil change at 7,000 miles because at a TBN of 1.0 it is considered depleted. So yeah, he's been running this engine hard. When you compare it to the TBN of 1.9 on my engine oil at 155 hours, which was basically the same number of miles roughly that we did this at, and I had a TBN of 1.9, all highway miles. So as you can see, you know, a higher mileage, 318,591 miles. My TBN oil using synthetic, my TBN was definitely far higher, so it wasn't nearly as depleted as what Antonio was doing to his Edge. Now going across here, we have on the right side here, we have Lulubelle, my Ford Edge, with 318,591 miles, and then we have Antonio's Ford Edge with 103,000 miles. Mileage on the oil was roughly the same, and of course we took these oil samples. So we're going to go with the aluminum first at 4 parts per million, which universal average is 4 parts per million. We're doing good there. Then we move down to the chromium, and Antonio has a 1 part per million chromium, and this plays into something, but the universal averages are 0, and you notice my engine has 0. Now moving on, we have iron at 17 parts per million for Antonio's beater, and we have 9 parts per million for Lulubelle, my much higher mileage engine, with a universal average of right here, excuse me, a universal average of 11. That doesn't bode well for Antonio in that aspect either. Now the copper, Antonio had 8, and Lulubelle, you know, had 2. Universal average 16. So copper, he's not doing too bad, but still he is, you know, 4 times higher in his copper wear than my Ford Edge is. Now lead universal average is 1 part per million, where Antonio is at 7 and Lulubelle's at 0. So that tells you that there's something going on. Tin, by the way, the lead is usually 1, and Antonio's even above that. Tin is 1 and 1 for both of us, with a universal average of 0. Now that goes over our metals, and we don't have anything else on the metals. I want to take and bring the point across on this, is that Antonio is beating his car, and it's showing it through the bearings, because you're going to have iron wear, and you're going to have copper, lead, and chromium. Okay, he's got all of it, which is the initial stages of bearing wear. Now, as we all know, there's lead and chromium on the bearings, and then underneath those are, of course, the brass and everything else that goes with that. And he is essentially starting to score the bearings through his heavy foot, and he is starting to cause. This will not go away. It will get worse and worse as it goes. Now, he asks, well, why did you have me use 530 oil? Well, I'm trying to build you a little better cushion to help give you a little more time with your engine. But if he continues going this route, these numbers are going to get bigger. And what that does is, since these are bearing materials, his bearings are going to become scored even worse, and that creates more heat, more friction, and more damage. And it's just a snowball. It starts getting worse and worse and worse. So yeah, he's at that point. Now his Molly B and the oil he had was 74, universal average is 72, I had 83. So I use a little bit better oil than he does. Nickel was 1, universal average is 0, so he had just a trace of nickel. Manganese, he had 2, I had 1, and universal average is 4. And then his silver is 0 across the scale like mine. Titanium, he had just a touch of it, just along with me, with the universal average being 4. Potassium was 0 across the board with a universal average of 4. And then he had the boron, which is 35, and then I had a 49, and the universal average is 50. So you can see the trait here. The engine oil I use is definitely better than what he's been using. He had some silicon, 10, or 8, and I had 10. Universal average is 7, so that's no biggie there. Sodium, he had 18. Well, sodium is something we want to watch out also for coolant and everything else, but he is definitely not in that area. But the universal average is 37, so his oil probably had sodium in it, whereas the oil I choose doesn't have that much sodium. Calcium, he definitely has a cheaper oil because it doesn't have near as much calcium, but then again he ate up his TBN, so that could be the decrease in the calcium content that he actually had, whereas my calcium content was higher and I had a higher TBN. But the universal average is 1680 for that. Magnesium, he had 588, I had 433. Universal average is 376. Phosphorus, he had 526, I had 716, and the universal average is 694. Now on the zinc, we had 631 for Antonio, I had 810, and the universal average is 787. And the barium, he had 1, I had 0, universal average is 2. Now moving up, we have what we call our SUS viscosity, and as Antonio had, he had a 56.8. Mine is a little thicker than his because my motor oil was a cocktail and it had a little higher as you can say viscosity to it. Again, on the low end his was lower, mine was higher because I had higher viscosities on that. Flash points, his flash point was at 405, mine was at 430. Again, I had a thicker oil, which gave me a better flash point. Fuel in the oil was pretty much the same, nothing. Antifreeze 0, which is good for him and me also. Water is 0. The insolubles, of course, was 0.2, which equal across the board on that. And then, of course, the TBN was 1.5 on his oil, and mine was 1.9, meaning I had a better life oil. I could have drove mine further, whereas Antonio needed an oil change at that point. Well, folks, that's the tale of the tape on Antonio's beater, and it is definitely beat. We're talking an engine with like 103, 107,000 miles. Vice, my engine, which is 318 something, is almost 322 now. Young man thinks he's got a race car, and he's treating it like a race car. We all know the more you abuse an engine, the faster it goes downhill, and that's exactly what's happening to that 3.5 VCT Duratec that Antonio's driving. If he doesn't slow his roll, he's going to end up with not only having to replace the transmission, but the engine also, because neither are doing good. I drove it, I know what it does. No matter how much he wants to argue that the transmission shifts like butter, it does not. And denial is a river in the Amazon, and Antonio, gonna have to change your ways if you want this engine to last and that transmission. That's all I can tell you. But hey, we went and got it changed, got fresh oil in it, new spark plugs, got him going down the road. it'll serve him for a while. I have no doubt that it will run for a while, but how much longer will it run if he continues with his behaviors and driving it now? That's really what it comes down to. So taking it easy on it, changing the oil more frequently, using a heavier oil would probably give him some longevity. If he continues with his ways, it's just going to go downhill, because an engine does not repair itself, and it doesn't matter what kind of additives you add to it. All you're doing is covering the symptoms. You're not fixing it. So that's it. That's all I can tell you, Antonio. This is to you, buddy. Slow the roll. That's all I can tell you. Anyway, that's what the oil report says, and it ain't gonna lie. And you know, you take it for what it is, folks. But that definitely shows you what a well taken care of engine looks like, and one that's beat mercilessly. And it's all the tail of the tape at this point. Anyway, like, subscribe, join MACTFORDEDGE on MeWe and all this other stuff. Subscribe to YouTube, and check out my Rumble channel when you get a chance. But we are definitely on the MeWe group. Join up there on MACTFORDEDGE on MeWe, because that's where you're going to find us. And it's an ever-growing group on that aspect. But hey, my feet hit the floor today. I'm having a great day, and I want you to have a great day too. Band of One's always got some great music. And what else? Mercy Grill's always got something to say. And maybe at the end of this, you might see me whooping Antonio on a little short spurt run in his little quasi-drag race.
Thank you for watching MacT's videos, and remember to like and subscribe. This is a Mercy Go production.